Hello, I'm going to propose an explanation for how astrology works. We can call this a paradigm for astrology or a model for astrology. We can call it a theoretical framework for astrology, a basic concept for how astrology works, and I call this fractal sacred geometry. So for those of us who believe astrology works, the big question is, why does it work? How does it work? And I'm going to explain some of the scientific evidence for how astrology works. In the past 2 years, there's been a growing amount of evidence. It's now an overwhelming amount of evidence that astrology appears to be based on fractal sacred geometry. We'll talk about the tropical zodiac specifically and some other ideas in astrology and the evidence that they're based on fractal sacred geometry. And these are specific ideas. This isn't just vague philosophy. We're going to see specifically the discoveries in science that strongly suggest that astrology exists and that it's based on what I'm calling fractal sacred geometry. And so what we're going to see here is that I'm going to be presenting these scientific ideas. These scientific ideas are also mystical. And the idea that ideas can be simultaneously mystical and scientific, might sound real cool and groovy, woo-woo, it's scientific and it's mystical. But this, there's a long tradition to this. And very often in modern times, people think of science as logical and rational, the mystical as intuitive, and these two areas are very, very separate from each other. But there's a long tradition of science and mysticism being integrated together, and this tradition has continued right up until modern times. First of all, when you think about scientific ideas, it often inspires a sense of awe and wonder when you think about how small the Earth is and how huge the known universe is. It's just staggering. It makes your jaw drop, and you go, "Oh my God!" So just that sense of awe and wonder engenders a sense of the mystical or the infinite. Also, scientific theories often emphasizes a oneness behind life, four major forces that everything in life is based on, or that all of chemistry is based on subatomic particles which are identical. All electrons are the same. All colors are the same. They're just different wavelengths. All sound frequencies are the same. They're just different. They're different wavelengths. So the sense of a oneness beyond nature has a little bit of a mystical quality to it. But I think even more impressive than the sense of awe and wonder that we get, or the sense of oneness behind nature that science can bring about, is that many of the greatest scientists were mystics. And I'm not talking about just in ancient times, but of course, in ancient times, for the most part, people weren't as empirical or scientific as we are in the modern day. So in modern times, it's often ignored that these great scientists were mystics. A good number of them. For example, Niels Bohr, Schrodinger, Tesla, Einstein, all refer to mystical things, and sometimes quite directly. This very first paragraph in this article here at newsgram.com states it very nicely. At first glance, the subjects of science and metaphysics seem to be polar opposites to each other. This is often how we're presented these ideas. But Niels Bohr, one of the greatest physicists of all times, who made many of these modern discoveries in physics, said, "I go to the Upanishads to ask questions." So these physicists not only came up with ideas through their scientific methods, but they were often inspired by mysticism. Schrodinger also makes it very clear. I'll read this entire paragraph. He says, "This life of yours which you are living is not merely a piece of this entire existence, but in a certain sense the whole. Only this whole is not so constituted that it can be surveyed in one single glance. This, as we know, is that sacred mystic formula which is yet really so simple and so clear. Tattvam asi, I hope I'm saying that right. This is you, or once again in such words as I am in the east and west, I am above and below, I am this entire world. So Schrodinger presents this mystical view of the world as all one. One more statement from Schrodinger. This unity and continuity of Vedanta are reflected in the unity and continuity of wave mechanics. This is entirely consistent with the Vedanta concept of all is one, or all in one. Wow. So these are the people making the discoveries, the greatest scientists, inspired by the sense of oneness. They are mystics. So when people set up science and mysticism as two separate worlds, there is a strong tradition in modern science of them being separate, and there's another strong tradition of them being the same. And again, these are the people, Schrodinger, Bohr, the greatest physicists making the discoveries inspired by the mystical traditions. So, let's just keep in mind that the view that mysticism and science are tightly integrated has a very strong tradition to it. Unfortunately, in astrology today, many of the astrologers seem to be unaware of this, and as soon as you start bringing in scientific ideas, they often feel like their sacred, intuitive, mystical art is being negatively impacted by something that's overly rational or mechanical. And that is not necessarily the case, and it's not in what I'm presenting you here today. Now, this is also true not only in science. Not only are the scientists very often mystics, but some of the psychologists are also more scientific than is often recognized. Carl Jung is an example of this. So some modern astrologers call themselves Jungian astrologers. Many of these Jungian astrologers are skeptical of scientific approaches to astrology. Some of these Jungian astrologers see astrology as fundamentally a language of the soul, and that astrology is a language of myths, symbols, and archetypes, and that astrology does not function primarily in the realm of science. This is a popular idea today. That's fine. What I don't think is so great is to call them Jungian astrologers, because that's not the view of Carl Jung. I think it's more proper to call them neo-Jungian astrologers, because they've modified or picked up on one aspect of Jung's thinking without continuing the full world of Jungian thought. It's not a philosophy that agrees with Jung, because Jung worked with the physicist Wolfgang Pauli on discovering the integration of physics and psychology. So, for example, you can read this article at newscientist.com called Why Two Geniuses Delved into the Occult, the two geniuses being Carl Jung and Wolfgang Pauli, who developed a very strong relationship. Jung is recognized as a genius in psychology, Wolfgang Pauli is a genius in physics, and they developed this close working relationship and friendship, trying to figure out how physics and psychology are integrated, how they are part of one whole reality, and trying to work out the specific details of it. And this takes them into a world of numerology, mysticism, and alchemy. So again, what I'm emphasizing here, kind of the bottom line of what the point I'm making, is that mysticism, science, and psychology, for some of these geniuses, people who make these discoveries and breakthroughs, are all part of one reality that are not in conflict with each other. And that's also what I'm presenting here today, is we are now, at last, through the work of many people, fulfilling the dream of Carl Jung. We're finding out what Wolfgang Pauli and Carl Jung were searching for. We're finding out that integration of how astrology is part of physics. We're also following through on the vision of Niels Bohr and Erwin Schrodinger on the mystical side of astrology and how this is part of our lives. So now let me start introducing to you more of the details of what we're going to learn about the specifics of how physics and mathematics is a basis for concepts in astrology. One of the things we're going to learn is why there are 12 zodiac signs. The physics indicates, the recent discovery in physics, or models that are being built from physics, indicate that there's a pattern of 12 in the sky, that the sky, or that some, well, not necessarily the sky, but space itself is divided into 12 regions of 30 degrees. We're going to see how these models are being built and the growing evidence that that space is divided into 12 sections of 30 degrees, and how these 12 sections of space get connected to the equinoxes. So the details of how this happens are starting to become clearer and clearer, especially just in the last few years. So we're going to see how fractal sacred geometry creates this. Now, one of the fundamental ideas is that there are hidden structures in space. This is a new idea in physics. In fact, let me jump ahead in my slides here to this section. I want to talk about this straight away. Is that some scientists now believe that the best way to explain the behavior of some atomic particle is in terms of geometric patterns that exist within space. So this is an idea in physics. In my second section here, scientists have recently proposed that a newly discovered mathematical object resembling a multifaceted jewel in higher dimensions is one of the most basic features of reality. So what the physicists are proposing now is that there's a mathematical object that exists within space that's similar to a multifaceted jewel. And it is fundamental, it's one of the most basic features of reality. Here's an article about this. A jewel at the heart of quantum physics in quantummagazine.org that describes this. Here's the very first paragraph. Physicists have discovered a jewel-like geometric object that dramatically simplifies calculations of particle interactions and challenges the notion that space and time are fundamental components of reality. So instead of the time-space continuum being seen as the fundamental reality, there's this jewel-like geometric object. So that there are hidden structures in space, completely new, much simpler than anything that's been done before. Revelation that particle interactions may be consequences of geometry significantly advances a decades-long effort to reformulate quantum field theory. So that geometry, this is what I'm calling sacred geometry, this geometry within space is fundamental. So advances in science are beginning to sound more like astrology, because in astrology we say that there are these structures within space. There's some zodiac. You can take space and divide it into 12 sections. Well, why would space be divided into 12 sections? It's not in 12 sections. Space is just empty space with maybe some light waves traveling through it. Or so we thought. But now scientists are saying, no, space is not just this formless, empty thing in which there are things and there are light waves and sound waves. The space itself has inherent structures. And just that proposal that space itself has inherent structure to it, well, that's getting a lot closer to astrology. And I'm going to show you some ideas on how these structures in space could be created that would create a zodiac. So my point right now is that physics and astrology are growing closer and closer together by the fact that physics is now proposing structures in space, which is what astrologers have always been saying. And again, these multifaceted jewel in higher dimensions. This is an important concept and not part of astrology that we're introducing into astrology, is that astrology actually works in a higher dimensional reality. Is that behind our four-dimensional reality of height, width, depth, and time, there are higher dimensional realities. This is a basic idea in string theory and other ideas in physics. And these geometric structures actually exist in higher dimensions. You know, if you're religious, you can think of them almost as like a heaven world, or in metaphysics like a mental plane or something, that there's some other higher dimension in which these geometric patterns exist. I read this section that these physicists have discovered a jewel-like geometric object that dramatically simplifies calculations of particle interactions and challenges the notion that space and time are fundamental components of reality. That's worth repeating again, because the emphasis here is that the geometry of space is the most fundamental. Sounds like astrology to me, that there's this structures within space. Excuse me. So, completely new, very much simpler than anything that's been done before, said Andrew Hodges, mathematical physicist at Oxford. It's a better formulation that makes you think about everything in a completely different way, said David Skinner, theoretical physicist at Cambridge University. I love this. Makes you think about everything in a completely different way, and in a way that's much closer to astrology. So as I said, we're getting into some specific ideas on how astrology works with these discoveries in physics, indicating that a geometry of space in higher dimensions is fundamental, is underlying the physical world in which we live. Okay, now let me go back and see these sections that I skipped over. Okay, so, well, another point we're going to get to is that these structures in space are created by something called spin. And I'll get into the spin a little bit more, but we're building a sequence of ideas here. Idea number one, that there are structures in space. Idea number two we're going to learn about is something called spin, and that spin creates the structures in space. And what we have to keep in mind here, before I go on, I'm going to talk about spin a little bit more in a minute, but before I talk about spin a little bit more, let me make this point. When I say space, we tend to think of space as just this empty thing. We can't really think of space separate from things. So if you think about a chair, a car, a house, a tree, space is almost superfluous in our normal thinking. There are things, and things occupy space. So space is roughly equivalent to objects in our normal thinking. However, in physics now, there's increasingly this idea that space and things are really not identical, and here's the really weird part: space is more fundamental than things. So space is something that is difficult for the human mind to completely grasp, but space is a thing. The physicist Nassim Haramein emphasizes this, that space is fundamental and has often been overlooked. I'm going to play for you a section of a video by Nassim Haramein. Let me go back to my video here. Let me read this quote from Nassim Haramein, and then I'll play the video. He says that the only thing you can find everywhere is space. We have space between galaxies. We have space between planets and stars. There is space everywhere. If you look at the atomic level, you take the densest molecule like carbon in a diamond. If you grew one of these atoms that is at that molecule to the size of an orange, the next orange would be 2 football fields away. Even the atom has 99.999% space, so space is everywhere. So you follow what he's saying here. If you take the distance of the sun to Mercury, it's enormous amounts of space. The space between stars, enormous. At the molecular level, enormous. No matter what level we look at, whether the tiny microscopic level or the level of the solar system or galaxies, almost everything is space. 99.9999% space. And we focus on matter, which is the 0.00001, however many O's you want to put in there. In fact, all you have is space that is wiggling a little bit. All we are touching here is a little solid space. Nothing has ever touched anything. So when you clap your hands together, or you touch a table, or you touch anything, actually what you're feeling is not molecules to molecules. You're feeling the force fields that are interacting is what you're actually feeling. All you have is electrostatic fields that are interacting with each other. So we have the illusion that when I clap my hands together, my hands are touching. Actually, what's touching are these electrostatic fields that are interacting and bouncing off each other. Let's play this section of a video. I'm going to play this section here starting at 33 minutes where Nassim Haramein explains his thinking about space. Let's play the video. I hope I get this at the right volume so you can hear it. Okay, here we go. I'm going to play about 2 minutes of this.
Probably not. So it appeared to me very early that maybe it's the space that defines matter, not matter that defines the space. Maybe we should pay attention to the 99.99999% instead of the 0.00001%. Because, I mean, if that space is actually something instead of nothing, maybe it's just the space dividing that makes it so that there's a little jiggle that we call matter in it. You guys see what I mean? Well, you might say, well, what do you mean the space is something instead of nothing? Well, you know, you typically think of the space between us as empty. You might think, okay, well, there's a little bit of air in it, like little molecules of air, but generally it's empty. But is that true? No, it's only empty to your perception of the space. I mean, if I brought certain instruments in here to measure the electromagnetic radiation in this room, it would be far from being empty, right? This room is full of X-rays, radio waves, even gamma ray from galactic, you know, cosmic gamma rays. And I mean, like, there's all sorts of stuff going on in here. There's all the radio station with the radio waves and all this stuff. And the fact is that even if you just took a little radio box, you could just tune the little crystal, and all of a sudden you hear the announcer in there. Is the announcer in the box? No. Are you typically conscious that there is an announcer or there's music on the radio waves in the room right now without the little crystal tuned to it? No. But you could actually think of your brain and your nervous system exactly as this radio set tuned to a very specific channel that you call you.
Okay. So it's good to hear this in Nassim Haramein's own words to emphasize this idea of space as being fundamental. And space is where consciousness is. Space is not in our minds. And our minds are like radios that are attuned to certain frequencies. And we attune to those frequencies and have those thoughts, and we think that they are us. And this is the concept in vibrational astrology, is that in vibrational astrology, we see how these vibrations repeated in fractal levels up to the solar system are things that our brains, our nervous system, and our body are attuned to. So the whole movement in physics today, the emphasis on space, the emphasis on vibration, Nassim Haramein's emphasis on fractal realities, how things are repeated from the subatomic level to the visible level to the grand level of galaxies, also is similar to what we say in astrology. Things are repeating over and over again, and that space, that thing that's 99.999%, is extremely important in our lives. And in this space are frequencies, vibrations, and waves, and consciousness. Okay, so what I'm pointing out here is how the view of science and the view of astrology are growing closer and closer together. Here are other quotes from videos by Nassim. He says, Einstein, physical objects are not in space, but these objects are physically extended. He is saying that an object is not just sitting in space, but an object actually is space, extending itself, making itself visible. At a certain frequency, it becomes an object. So what we have is that space is a kind of primal or spiritual basis for things. And space has structures. That's what I was reading to you before about these recent discoveries about structures in space. So these new theoretical developments in physics emphasizing space, the importance of space, and that space has higher dimensions. Space is something the human mind can't completely understand, but it does have structures in it, in these higher dimensional realities, and these structures are informing the physical world and are a basis of it. So that's this sacred. We can call it sacred because it's more fundamental. It's something from which our physical world is, you might say, born or developed out of. So all of these are ideas in science. They're also mystical ideas. And as I presented earlier, physics from the beginning in the early 1900s with Niels Bohr and other physicists has, Erwin Heisenberg and other people, has been mystical in nature from the beginning. Now, so to summarize some key points. Number one, there are structures in space. Number two, these structures exist in a higher dimensional reality. They exist in a reality that has more than 4 dimensions. The 4 dimensions we humans know are height, width, depth, and time. And these ideas acknowledge a kind of a higher plane or higher existence beyond what we humans can understand. And that's what I'm calling the sacred geometry. Now, why is there a zodiac? There's a zodiac because of spin. Spin is one of the fundamental properties of the universe. Subatomic particles have 3 basic properties: mass, charge, and spin. Mass is a reasonable idea. You can think of mass as how heavy something is. Charge is a reasonable idea. So you can think of charge, there's positive charges, negative charges. It's the basic yin-yang of the universe. You can think of it as the idea of a male-female polarity right down to the subatomic level. So no wonder people are looking for their soulmate. So you have mass, you have charge, and spin is interesting. It's not maybe as obvious of a fundamental idea that would exist for subatomic particles, but everything is spinning. The subatomic particles have spin. The Earth spins on its axis. The Earth revolves around the Sun. That revolution around the Sun is a kind of a spin, a circular motion. The spin of subatomic particles is now visualized by physicists as not being an actual physical spin, but it has a lot of the properties of angular momentum. It's similar to a physical motion. The mathematics that's worked out to describe the behavior of subatomic particles indicates there's a spin, but it's really a little difficult for our human mind to visualize it. But it's a form of spin, a little bit different from the spin we're familiar with, but it's a spin. So we have spin at different levels. Even our sun is going around, our solar system is going around the galactic center. So things are spinning around each other. And the basic proposal that I have is that spin creates the zodiac. So as we shall see, spin creates the zodiac. So what I've done is I'm integrating ideas in physics and making a hypothesis. There is no evidence yet, other than from astrologers, that there is a thing called a zodiac. There's nothing in science that, as far as I know yet, that describes the zodiac. But for those of us who think there's a zodiac, it appears that the zodiac is created out of spin. And also this idea of the different levels of spin being connected, that the subatomic spin, the Earth spinning on its axis, and the Earth revolving around the Sun, those three levels of spin being related, has an ancient history to it that two of those levels, the level of the Earth spinning on its axis and the Earth rotating around, revolving around the Sun, that identity has been identified in ancient times. In the Bible, a day is equated with a year. So a day is a measurement of the Earth spinning on its axis. A year is the measurement of the Earth spinning around the Sun. And here's one reference in the Bible. After the number of the days in which you search the land, even 40 days, each day for a year, shall ye bear your iniquities, even for 40 years. So this is from the book Numbers, 14, 33 and 34. So the Bible is equating days and numbers. I think this is rather extraordinary that the Bible is presenting this idea of a kind of a fractal reality where at these different levels of spin are identified with each other. So we have this idea of a spin operating at a fractal level all the way back in the time that these parts of the Bible were written. And in astrology today we have an idea of secondary progressions, which is based on an equivalence of a day and a year. So we're seeing spin as a fundamental property and seen as a fractal concept, something that's repeated at different levels. Now, so those first two levels have been identified by the ancients. The level of the Earth spinning on its axis and the level of the Earth revolving around the Sun is being equated. Maybe the subatomic levels of spin are also related. Okay, so and Nassim Haramein has developed theories in physics that involve all parts of the universe being connected together, and the idea that nothing is separate from anything else. So, with the ways that everything is interconnected, it's reasonable to guess that these three levels of spin may be interconnected, and that spin may also be related to the structures within space. So I'm building upon these ideas, and we have on the one hand this idea that there are fundamental structures in space. We have an idea that there is spin, and we have an idea of numbers building patterns. Now, if we guess that the way that numbers build patterns is related to spin, that in the spin these number sequences are generated to create some of the structures within space, we would have our zodiac. So I'm guessing, I'm building a hypothesis that spin, this fundamental property of the universe, these number sequences, which are a fundamental property of life, and the structures within space, which scientists are proposing are fundamental, are all connected. We don't have any direct evidence of this, but I'm presenting a possibility, a reasonable possibility. I think it's the most reasonable possibility ever presented for why astrology might work, because we have no idea of why it would work. And it fits in line with the long and strong tradition in astrology of a sense of oneness, of a sense of interconnectedness, of a sense that mysticism and science are all one. So it's a hypothesis. We don't have any proof of it, but it ties everything together. It makes sense of everything. And once we make this leap, we test out this idea that perhaps spin, the fundamental spin of subatomic particles, the spin of the Earth around its axis, the spin of the Earth revolving around the sun, is this movement could be creating structures within space, and these structures within space are so fundamental. Through number sequences, we have a zodiac. And let me show you how it gets created. One of the most basic number sequences is the Fibonacci sequence, which a lot of you are no doubt familiar with. Fibonacci numbers are 0 plus 1 equals 1, 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus 2 equals 3, 2 plus 3 equals 5. You take a sequence of numbers and you just add the last two numbers. If you do that and you put it in a base 8, a modulus 8 function, here's what you get. 0 plus 1, I'm going to put it around a circle. I'm putting Fibonacci numbers around a circle, and I do 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. 3 plus 5 is 8. When I get to 8, I subtract 8. So we put the Fibonacci numbers in an 8 rhythm. Every time we get to 8, we're back to 0. And there's a precedent for this. That's what I'm looking for. A precedent for it, which is that the idea that everything is traveling in waves or beats. So then we get 5 plus 0 is 5. 0 plus 5 is 5. 5 plus 5 is 10. 10 becomes 2 because 10 minus 8 is 2. 2 plus 7 is 9. 9 in minus 8 is 1. 7 plus 1 is 0. And then it repeats. So we end up, if we put the Fibonacci numbers in a beat of 8, in other words, a modulus 8 function, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are our 12 signs of the zodiac. So what I'm suggesting is that the 12 signs of the zodiac is a structure in space that's created by spin, and spin is generating Fibonacci numbers in various beats or rhythms, which we can calculate as modulus functions. And interestingly, we get, let's see here, the feminine elements are 1, 2, 5. So Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, we see 1, 2, 5. The earth signs are 1, 2, 5. The water signs, Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio, are also 1, 2, 5. So the feminine signs of earth and water both have a 1, 2, 5. The fire signs are 0, 3, 5 for the fire, and the air is 0, 1, 7. So what we end up with is that the feminine elements are 1, 2, 5, and the masculine and masculine are 0 with only odd numbers. So the fire is 0 with 3 and 5, or 0 with 1 and 7. That is all the odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, 7. So the fire signs are 0 with all the odd numbers, and the feminine are 1, 2, 5. So there's a consistency of the fire signs, the masculine or odd numbered signs versus the feminine or even numbered signs. Again, the fire signs are 0 with all the odd numbers, and the feminine signs, both the earth and water, are 1, 2, 5. So you see that similarity that's creating the elements and the gender of the signs, that there's an affinity of these certain signs to each other, which is in the ancient tradition. So in this Fibonacci sequence, with a beat of 8, we see the 12 signs, and we also see some of the relationships between them. All signs of the same element add up to 8, which equals 0. Let's see if that's true. 0 plus 3 plus 5 is 8. For the air signs, 0 plus 1 plus 7 is 8. For the earth signs, 1 plus 5 plus 2 is 8. And for the water signs, 1 plus 2 plus 5 again is 8. So we see that each element adds up to 8, which is our base, which is 0. So you end up with a large number of coincidences. Are these just coincidences that the Fibonacci numbers put into a beat of 8 create 12 numbers, exactly the number of zodiac signs, and the number sequences within it relate very strongly to the idea of the elements, fire, earth, air, and water, and even the difference between the feminine signs and the masculine signs. All of that in this sequence of numbers. Is it just a coincidence, or could this be related to the fact that there are signs? So we don't know. But this is just the beginning. If you put the Fibonacci numbers in a 9 beat, you get 24 numbers, and which divides each sign into 2 sections. So as you put these Fibonacci numbers into different beats, they create patterns which relate to the concept of the zodiac. So we get a number for each half sign. Opposite numbers add to 0. So for example, 1 plus 8 is 9, and 9 as our base becomes 0. 1 plus 8 is 9, 2 plus 7 is 9, 6 plus 3 is 9, 5 plus 4 is 9. You get this polarity, which is another idea in astrology, that opposite signs and opposite points are polarized and complement each other and are strongly connected, and that's shown in the 9 sequence, a beat of 9 in the Fibonacci numbers. So as you put different beats into the Fibonacci numbers, you discover different aspects of astrological theory. Also interesting, I put in purple that the only 2 and 7 is in the fixed cross. So you'll see different kinds of patterns as you study this that relate to astrology. Here's an interesting thing, a discovery by a fellow named Russell Olhausen, where he took the 9 beat of the Fibonacci numbers and he calculated all kinds of relationships between the Fibonacci numbers that are created, including the traditional rulers of the zodiac signs. So what Russell discovered is that embedded in this sequence of Fibonacci numbers are the traditional rulers of the zodiac signs. That there's a separate number for Cancer and Leo. Gemini and Virgo have the same number. In astrology, we say that Gemini and Virgo are ruled by the same planet. Taurus and Libra end up with the same number. And Scorpio and Aries have the same number, and Sagittarius and Pisces have the same number, and Capricorn and Aquarius have the same number. So the signs with the same numbers are ruled by the same planets. I have an entire video on this. There are so many relationships of these numbers to ideas in astrology that it takes entire videos, a half hour long or so of each video, to just explore one of these areas. What I'm presenting in this video is an overview plus the new information that we've gotten more recently, this information about these discoveries of the geometry of space. I just found out about that in the last few months. So we keep making more and more discoveries and becoming aware of more and more things that tie all this together. So you can watch these entire videos. I think I've got about 8 or 9 videos that describe all of these different relationships of Fibonacci numbers to ideas in astrology. Here's information on how decanates are related to this base 9 Fibonacci numbers. I'm not going to go over all this, but you'll see here that each sign is divided into 3, and when you do that, you end up with the decanates, which is this idea that each sign can be divided into thirds. The anticia and contra anticia show up. You'll see 4, 4, 1, 1, 7, 7, same numbers around the cardinal signs. Over here, they add up to 9. 8 plus 1 is 9. 5 plus 4 is 9. 2 plus 7 is 9. There's incredible patterns going on that relate exactly to ideas in astrology. So even the decanates, the anticia and contra anticia show up. Russell did some more research where he found Dwadasamsa signs. When I say he found Dwadasamsa signs, what I mean is that there are, if you study these Fibonacci number sequences and how they are arranged around the circle, and you play with the numbers a little bit, you will see all of these things in the pattern of numbers. Here's where the numbers created by the 9 base also create the elements. The 3 signs of the same element total to a 3 or 6, so that Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, 4 plus 1 plus 7 is 12. 12 minus 9 is 3, so you end up with a 3. And here we see the air signs. 2 plus 5 plus 8 is 15. 15 minus 9 is 6. And 3 plus 6 is 9, so all these odd numbered signs become 0. There's so many patterns. I'm not going to go over all of them here. I talk about them in more detail in other videos. You can also pause this and read all these details that I have here describing the intricate relationships. The point I'm really trying to get across here is that the number of ways that these Fibonacci numbers line up with astrological ideas is phenomenal. It's staggering. It's really almost unbelievable. If you do 10 beats, you'll get extraordinary number of relationships to the zodiac. I have entire videos about this. One of our most popular videos is on the basis of the zodiac from the 10 beat of the Fibonacci numbers. Here's just some different patterns. I'm not going to go over all of this. We're already 48 minutes into our video here. This video will probably be about an hour long. And I discuss all this in other videos. Also, not only do the prime numbers create the zodiac, but not only do the Fibonacci numbers create the zodiac, but prime numbers also do. And I have videos on prime number sequences, and that the prime numbers also create patterns of 30 degrees, 12 sections of 30 degrees. It's really amazingly fascinating. I don't think I'll go into all of this right here. You take the first prime numbers, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. If you multiply them together, you will get the 30. 2 times 3 times 5 is 30. If you take the next prime number, which is 7, 30 times 7 equals 210. 210 in the zodiac is 0 Scorpio. So 0 Scorpio is the starting point for the next level. So basically 2, 3, and 5 are the lowest prime numbers that create the basic structure of life. We have 2, we have males and females, we have 2 hands, we have 2 feet, we have 3, which is a very basic number, we have 5 fingers, we have 5 toes, we have 5 petals and many flowers. 2, 3, and 5 create the material world. That's why 7 is considered to be a spiritual number, because it takes you, there aren't as many things in nature built on 7. We don't have 7 fingers, we have 5 fingers. So the basic material world is created out of 2, 3, and 5. That creates the basic zodiac of 30 degrees, the 12 sections of 30 degrees. When you multiply by 7, consider to be a spiritual number because you don't see it in nature as much, but you see it in numbers, takes you to 0 Scorpio. And 0 Scorpio is the start of the planet ladder, the ruling, the planet rulers, and that's described in more detail in other videos. So I'm just giving you a quick overview. Those are all different patterns that we see in the Fibonacci numbers. A staggering number of patterns. I have hours of videos explaining the details of that. Here's patterns of prime numbers and how they create the Hellenistic bounds, called in medieval times the terms, how it creates signs of exaltation, and how the joys of the planets are related to the rulerships. Here's a diagram showing how the joys of planets, Saturn joys in the 12th house, and Saturn is exalted in Libra. I have an entire video on this. So in this video, I just want to give you a sense of the staggering amount of information that has been brought together on how number sequences are creating the fundamental ideas in astrology in great detail. You can watch the other videos to study, you might say, the mechanics of this. To be a great practicing astrologer, you don't need to be an expert in these mechanics or understanding why astrology exists. You just have to interpret it. What we are discovering is a basis of astrology that's based on ideas in physics, in mathematics, and supports many of the ancient concepts in astrology. So I'm just giving you a quick tour of some of these ideas that are explained in other videos. So I've already gone over this, about why there's a zodiac, and we believe that spin is generating number sequences, and those number sequences, as I've just shown you, create the 12 signs of the zodiac. And I've already gone over this. And I've described this. And the next thing I want to mention is that what is how the zodiac gets anchored to 0 Aries and 0 Libra, and it happens through something called dimension reduction. So what we do in astrology is we take the whole sky and we reduce it to a great circle called the ecliptic plane, and we take another great circle, the equatorial plane, and where these two great circles intersect is the vernal equinox and autumnal equinox, the 0 Aries and 0 Libra point. So our astrology is based on dimension reduction. We take the entire sky, we collapse it into a circle, we take those two circles, we collapse them into a point where those circles intersect, and we call those 0 Aries and 0 Libra. So it's dimension reduction, reducing a sphere to a circle to a point. And this is also done in physics. It's a big part of string theory, is dimension reduction. So higher dimensions, there's an actual higher dimensional reality with more than 4 dimensions, collapses into our physical world of 4 dimensions, and it's part of nature, part of the fundamental way that life works. through dimension reduction. So we now understand why there are 12 signs. They're created by number sequences generated through spin. We understand how they get anchored to the 0 Aries and 0 Libra points. It happens through dimension reduction. So the fundamentals of astrology are exactly the same as the fundamentals that are proposed for ideas such as string theory. Same basic concepts are at work. And also our ascendant and descendant are also intersections of great circles. So this is how astrology is created. It's created out of the same processes that occur in physics and in mathematical modeling. There are structures in space, and we see how those structures are created. Now, we're building models, we're building concepts that fit the data. Is all of this a coincidence? Are we forcing something? Are we trying to retrofit something arbitrarily? No. The reason I say no is because so many things just fit together naturally and easily. We don't have to force anything. All we do is we just generate these number sequences, and they naturally fall right into the patterns of astrology with very little effort. We don't have to struggle to do this. As soon as you start laying out the numbers, the coincidences jump out at you very quickly and very rapidly. So I've already talked about this, the Paisano periods. Maybe I should have discussed this a little more at the beginning, but I do discuss this in other videos, how the Fibonacci numbers divided into modulus functions create these basic patterns. These are known in mathematics as Paisano periods. They've been known about at least since about the 1700s. So to summarize, the Fibonacci sequence is a growth process in nature that's already known. We see the Fibonacci number in pine cones and sunflowers, etc. Beats of the Fibonacci sequence create rhythms of growth. Is a reasonable idea, seems possible. Note that even prime numbers have harmonic patterns, which is the Riemann hypothesis. So this idea that there would be rhythms in number sequences has a history to it, has a precedent to it. It's a reasonable thing to propose. That the fundamental process of spin operates at all levels is a reasonable thing to propose. That it's attuned to the Paisano periods is very speculative from this point of view, but it fits in with astrological theory. Combined with dimension reduction, the Paisano periods create the zodiac and the various qualities of spin, such as the elements, etc. So that's the basic idea. There's some speculation, some new hypotheses being presented. It fits the data, it pulls everything together, and it shows that astrology is not as far-fetched and wild and weird as it seems. Also, I want to mention that these ideas I'm presenting fit very beautifully, specifically with vibrational astrology, which is a form of astrology that I use. And also, I think this is one of my final statements here, a quote of Nikola Tesla. I still haven't found a clear primary source for it, but we'll assume it's true. A lot of people refer to it. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, and that's what we're doing. We're finding that the secrets of the universe, the secrets of physics, the secrets of mathematics, the secrets of astrology, the secrets of all these things are all bound together in these vibrations, in these frequencies, taking beats or modulus functions of these growth functions like the Fibonacci numbers and the prime numbers, which are the building blocks of the number system. And also the idea of, as far as fractal theory and things being related at different levels, it's been known for a long time that reality is non-local. It goes back to Bell's theorem and work in physics. We know that reality is non-local, that things are connected across time and space. We know that there are singularities. Professor Jana Levin, cosmologist at Columbia University, points out that collisions at the Hadron Collider create very rapidly decaying small black holes, and that black holes are singularities that cannot be described in terms of matter. She states that the original Big Bang happened in space, which is everywhere, and not at a point. Well, this sounds a lot like the ideas we talked about at the beginning of this video, this mystical sense of oneness. So that Big Bang is like everywhere at the same time. So again, this close relationship of mysticism and science in the physicists in the early 20th century, right up to leading cosmologists today like Jan Levin at Columbia University. Also, mathematical concepts are often found to have practical applications later, and that's what I'm doing here. We're showing that the mathematical concepts of the Fibonacci numbers and the more specifically Paisano periods appear to have a practical application in understanding how structures in space are created through spin. And also, I'll mention that astrologer Dane Rudhyar emphasized that the zodiac is a 12-phase cycle. He referred to the zodiac as a cosmic mandala, and this is literally true if the zodiac is based on Paisano periods. So a lot of what I'm presenting here is consistent with astrological ideas, that we're seeing the zodiac as phases in space, phases in a cycle, which is what Rudhyar said. So we're seeing amazing consistencies of all these interconnections. And by the way, if you want to learn more about prime numbers, I recommend the book Music of the Primes by Marcus Sautoy. So all of these ideas are very intricately connected. I'm now at just slightly over 1 hour. This is one of my longest videos to quickly summarize some of the ideas and how we've developed this model for understanding what astrology is. I appreciate it if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. It helps support the videos. And here are some of the websites for the software. I'm a software developer for Cosmic Patterns and Matrix software. These are the websites: astrosoftware.com, astrologysoftware.com, our online astrology interpretations reports at Star Guidance, our School of Astrology, and other free services. So those are some of the things that I do, and I do appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel. It helps support our work in creating these videos. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.